Punishment in popular understanding has always been the first response to crime. However, many have argued that the standard one-size-fits-all approach to punishment, embodied in imprisonment, is neither relative nor acceptable. As a result, academics and policymakers alike have begun looking for alternatives that make controlling crime easier and handling offenders more effective. This presentation will serve two purposes. Firstly, I'll critically review the effectiveness of prison as a form of punishment. Here, I'll consider the aims of imprisonment and assess what extent the prison service meets such aims. Secondly, I will explore the alternatives to prison and argue that restorative justice is the way forward in terms of both punishing and reforming the offender. Unlike other public services, the aims of the prison service are far from clear-cut. Different attitudes to punishment and controlling crime have forced the prison service to make a decision to uphold a certain approach. Arguably, despite efforts to rehabilitate and reintegrate the offender back into society in recent years, imprisonment is still very much viewed as a punitive approach to punishment. So in order to review the effectiveness of the prison, we must first ask ourselves what it is trying to achieve. Does prison serve to rehabilitate the offender? Is it successful at deterring crime? Is its purpose to denunciate those who have breached societal norms, or does it serve simply to punish those who have offended? The Prison Service's statement of purpose reads as follows. Her Majesty Prison services the public by keeping in custody those admitted by the courts. Our duty is to look after them with humanity and help them lead law-abiding and useful lives in custody and after release. Or, as in the view of David Hanson, the former Ministry of Justice Prison Minister, imprisonment serves a threefold purpose in that it aims to reform, to challenge some of the assumptions that have led to criminal behaviour, and ultimately to rehabilitate and reintegrate offenders back into society. If we are to judge the efficiency of prison based on this criteria alone, the prison service has already fallen at the first hurdle. Prison is effective in so much that it incapacitates the offender. Saying that, they don't even get that right all of the time. From the year beginning 1995 to the year ending 2012, 385 inmates escaped from prison or whilst in prison escort according to government statistics. This suggests that prisoners are still not fully secure and thus failing to protect the community 100% of the time. Anyway, as I was saying, by removing offenders off of the streets, the immediate threat of crime is also removed, well at least in theory that is. However, due to the prison service providing little in the way of reintegration support, offenders more often than not develop a revolving door syndrome, whereby they find themselves in the same conditions on release that caused their offending behaviour in the first place. As a result, the individual reoffends, returns to prison, only to be released again without being given proper reintegration support. Another highly debated topic in prison politics is the deterrent effect imprisonment is supposed to have on offending. As David Ramsbotham once famously said, the threat of imprisonment is effective at deterring those who have a job and a family, but not those who have no hope of achieving or attaining them. In order for our criminal justice system to be as effective as it should be, we must recognise that our prison system is full of desperate individuals who have fallen to the social ills of poverty, unemployment and poor education. In fact, a large percentage of those currently in the prison system are pleased for the safety, housing and friendship it offers. Because of this, recidivism rates remain persistently high at 47% of adults are reconvicted within 1 year of release, according to the Prison Trust Form. Such individuals would deter from crime upon release by being given the means by which to make an honest living and sufficient self-esteem to convince them to do so. However, due to the lacking resources at the prison service's disposal, prison is not only failing those in its care, it is also failing the communities it is supposed to protect. Anyway, moving on, as Sykes once said, the modern pains of imprisonment can be as painful as the physical maltreatment they have placed. This is sadly evident through the levels of self-harm and suicide within the prison system. For the 12 months ending September 2012, there were 56 self-inflicted deaths in England and Wales, as reported by the Howard League for Penal Reform. More shockingly, in 2011, 39% of self-harm deaths were by prisoners held on remand, despite compromising only 15% of the prison population. If this doesn't serve as punishment, I don't know what does. In addition to this, communication is limited from the outside world. Virtually all human rights are waived, and inmates spend up to 23 hours a day locked in their cells. How the prison service justifies all they are doing to rehabilitate, reintegrate and reform completely escapes me. Although so far I've painted the prison service out to be ineffective at everything it shouldn't be, it's not all doom and gloom. In recent years, despite its limited success, more emphasis has been placed on rehabilitating the offender through work and educational related opportunities. The National Grid-led Offender Training and Employment Programme, for example, works with prisoners coming to the end of their sentences and provides training and a job on release for those who pass a rigorous selection process. To date, over 2,000 prisoners have passed through the scheme, which has a reoffending rate of just 6%. This is a lot lower than those sentenced to community services or imprisonment alone. Such schemes, however, come at great expense, much to the dislike of George Osborne. If the prison budget were to be increased by just 1%, the outcomes of such programmes would be hard to miss. So, before I move on to discussing the alternative of restorative justice programmes, I'll quickly summarise the effectivity of prison as a form of punishment. If imprisonment was effective in any sense of the word, there would be work or education available for all prisoners, reoffending rates would plummet, and more prisons would be closing, opposed to a shift towards privatisation. Subsequently, it is clear imprisonment does not work as well as it could or should do. It is neither effective in its own right, nor as part of the criminal justice system. High offending rates reflect this and prove imprisonment fails to deter crime, rehabilitate the offender, and keep communities safe. Anyway, like I've been saying, imprisonment does not work, regardless of whatever it may be trying to achieve. However, at present there is growing confidence in stepping away from the punitive approach of punishment, and instead policymakers are looking for alternatives which truly do reform the offender. Restorative justice offers this, as it is grounded in the values of reparation, restitution, repairment, reconciliation, and reintegration. Unlike imprisonment, restorative justice rejects the premise that the state is the primary victim of offending, and instead places the victim and the offender at the centre of the response to crime, as put forward by Johnston. This involves a process of direct mediation between the victim and the offender, whereby they decide together upon a resolution to the offending behaviour. This may be carried out through offender-victim mediation, conferencing, or peace circles. Effectively, this places greater accountability on the offender, which aids in their recognition of the harm they have caused to society, and in doing so, aids in their rehabilitation. Furthermore, the victim also benefits from this, as it satisfies their need for vindication, reassurance, and forgiveness. In addition to this, restorative justice also satisfies the public's need to punish. One of the most challenging things for an offender to come to terms with is their feelings of overpowering guilt and remorse. Restorative justice enables them to do this. The evidence for the effectivity of restorative justice comes in the form of young offender recidivism rates. While recidivism rates persist at 71% for imprisonment and 52% for community sentences, as found by Jacobson and Gibbs, recidivism rates for restorative justice programs sit at only 38%. Although such programs do not eliminate reoffending, compared to other traditional non-restorative approaches such as imprisonment, restorative justice has been a lot more effective at improving victim and offender satisfaction, increasing offender compliance with restitution, and decreasing the recidivism rates of offenders. It would be unjust, however, if I did not acknowledge the limitations of restorative justice. Abolitionists, such as Ruggiero, deem the concept to be expensive, vague, and elusive, and suggest that such an approach still serves as a punishment, but is instead dressed up in a way that mimics that of rehabilitation. Others have argued that by doing away with imprisonment and residing in restorative justice alone effectively removes the legal rights and safeguards of wrongdoers, leaving them vulnerable to pain infliction through penal law. Restorative justice is also subject to utility, based on the type of offender it is subscribed to. As noted by Hudson, a number of problems arise, for instance, when applied to offences involving racial or sexual violence. It has also been criticised for imposing labels. Although restorative justice removes the role of the state as the victim, in doing so it also labels true victims as vulnerable and offenders as the problem. So here are my concluding thoughts on the alternatives to imprisonment. Restorative justice does not only solve everything that is dysfunctional in the criminal justice system. Instead, Zer describes the concept as a compass pointing in a direction, but not a detailed map explaining how to get there. However, restorative justice is the most efficient variant of rehabilitation and retribution the criminal justice system currently has at its disposal. It would be unreasonable to accept that the programme works for everyone, however, but if it would be delivered in addition or within the existing framework of the prison, we may be able to take one step closer towards a crime-free society.